Welcome, gun runner.
Just over 1 year ago, I did a greatest of all time video on the BBC Micro, one of the most popular British computers of the early 80s. And now it's time to do the same for its little brother, the Acorn Electron. And for those that don't know the relationship between the two, such as my friends across the pond, the Electron was conceived as a low-cost version of the BBC computer that massively reduced the chipset and thus the size and cost, so Acorn could better compete with the best-selling ZX Spectrum. Unfortunately, it wasn't quite the runaway success that Acorn and indeed the press of the time expected, which was mainly due to a number of technical issues that delayed the release of the Electron by over a year. But I won't go into that particular story here, as it would take up too much time, but I have made a video about it before, so I'll link that down in the description for those who want to know more. Despite these issues, the Electron did still build up a pretty strong user base, and it still has a very passionate group of fans who support it in the present day. As with previous greatest of all time videos, I put the big question to the members of several large retro gaming groups on Facebook, including the hugely popular and very lively Retro Gaming Hysteria, link in the description for those who want to join, as well as my own loyal subscribers, asking them to name their top 5 and the reasons why. Following the same rules as before, I awarded 5 points to your first choice, 4 points to second, and so on and so forth. I then counted up those votes to decide the final placings, and in the case of games having the same number of points, I then went to the number of votes awarded, followed by the number of first place votes to decide the final ranking. I actually used these tiebreakers quite a bit in this video. In fact, I even needed to create a new tiebreaker, which was based on my own personal preference, because I had 3 games at the end of the top 20 that had the exact same points and the exact same votes. I had similar issues in the wider top 40 list too, which as always will be available as an exclusive video for my loyal YouTube members and patrons in the next couple of weeks. Now, in terms of any interesting observations I made during the voting process, I found this one pretty fascinating in all honesty. Firstly, because I'm not massively familiar with Acorn Electron library, and secondly because I was intrigued to see how the list would compare to the one I produced for its big brother, the BBC Micro, as they share an awful lot of games in common. And I have to say that even with my fairly limited knowledge of the Electron, I was surprised to see quite a lot of big name titles for the computer not even make the final list at all. Not even the top 40. I won't list them here though, because that would spoil the video, but I might add a comment about them after this video is posted. So with that all important info out the way, there is nothing more to say about this one really, and a lot of people moan that the intros to these greatest of all time videos are far too long. So let's start the Acorn Electron themed countdown then, shall we?
Oh, I'm gratified so many parents could come along to learn a little about microcomputers. Your girls are already at home amongst the ROMs and the RAMs. Did I say something funny, Mrs. McAllister? First, let us examine one of the finest micros, the Electron from Acorn. It's as fast as a business computer, and it has a real keyboard. Pleasure tuning in, darling. Notice how it can grow and observe the color graphics. They would have warmed the heart of Michelangelo. You are familiar with Michelangelo, Mrs. Gale? That's a wicked rumor. Quite. Above all, the Electron uses the same language your girls use at school, BBC Basic. Colonel, which home micro uses BBC Basic? You will write out the Acorn Electron 100 times. There's no better micro in its class. If you'll pardon the pun, you do know what a pun is.
Until quite recently, I wasn't all that familiar with the Electron library, but here is a game I do know, having written about it in Retro Gamer magazine. Originally named Joust and self-published, this amazing port of the Williams arcade game was picked up by commercial label Godax and renamed Skirmish to avoid copyright problems. This brilliant bike racer by expert Acorn coder Kevin Edwards was ported over from the BBC Micro and remains mostly intact, even featuring corners, which, believe it or not, was a first on the machine at that time. Petrol heads will be in their absolute element with the wonderful Crazy Rider. Widely regarded as one of the best platformers on the Electron, it's pretty clear that Micropower's Ghouls took most of its cues from the seminal Manic Miner, but it also adds in a few little elements from the arcade classic Pac-Man, which makes things a bit more interesting. There aren't all that many official arcade conversions to the Acorn Electron, sadly, let alone good ones, but Ye Are Kung Fu is the standout title from that small selection, an excellent port of the Konami coin-op that went on to inspire modern fighting games like the unstoppable Street Fighter franchise. Of all the games on this list, I think I was most excited to discover Frenzy, a brilliant clone of the hugely popular Taito arcade game Kicks, which still ranks as one of my favourite games of all time. There are few, if any, titles on the system that are more addictive than this one. Although it very much borrowed the gameplay mechanics of the popular Atari arcade game Gravitar, Thrust very much expanded on the concept by introducing things like the need to collect fuel and rescue pods. It never really clicked with me, but you all seem to absolutely love it. Of all the games released for the Acorn computers, there are few with a reputation as high as Nick Pelling's highly original Stone Age platformer, Frack. The game was so successful, in fact, that it was later ported to the Commodore 64 and received numerous re-releases over the years too. Text adventures don't tend to score highly on lists like this, but Twin Kingdom Valley seems to be one of the exceptions. One of the things that really made this one stand out was the graphical interludes, that really helped bring the game to life and make it much more interesting with it. I've always been impressed by Starship Command, because if you didn't know better, you'd swear it was a port of an arcade game. Such is the brilliance of its fast-paced, high-score focused gameplay. It probably deserved a place a bit higher on this list, but I'm pleased it made the cut anyway. For those unaware, Boffin 2 isn't really a sequel, it's simply an Acorn Electron version of the BBC Micro game Boffin that could also be found on the flip side of the same tape. It's a clever combination of a puzzle game and a platformer where you guide a big-brained hero through 25 perilous screens. Now, it wouldn't be unfair to describe Dungeons as a clone of the popular Atari arcade game Gauntlet. However, it features one key gimmick that very much makes it stand out from the crowd, and that is the 4-player split-screen gameplay, which is remarkable on a budget-priced 8-bit micro. Repton was often labelled, rather unfairly I may add, as a Boulder Dash clone, but its gameplay was actually a lot more strategic and cerebral. This third game built on what came before by adding an absolutely brilliant level editor that made sure it never got boring. Often called the unofficial sequel to Citadel, which also made this list, Palace of Magic features remarkably similar gameplay, being a huge sprawling arcade adventure in a so-called Metroidvania style. It's often quoted as one of the hardest Acorn Electron games to complete. Another great arcade claim for the Acorn Electron, this one is just as blatant as the others I've featured already, being an almost perfect copy of the unbelievably successful Namco-developed space shooter Galaxian. One of the very earliest Electron games, but also one of the best. When it comes to 8-bit platformers for the home computers, there are few titles more famous than the seminal Chucky Egg, especially on the Electron, where you pick this game above the likes of Manic Miner, Killer Gorilla and Jet Set Willy to rank it in a very credible 6th place. Created by Peter Irvin, programmer of Starship Command, and Jeremy Smith of Thrust fame, this is often cited as one of the earliest examples of a Metroidvania game, and is a true hidden gem that offers some incredibly deep and involving gameplay. Certain gaming characters have become synonymous with specific systems over the years, often being called mascots. Sega has Sonic the Hedgehog, Nintendo has Mario, and Acorn have Repton, a character you love so much he appears for the second time in this countdown. Such was the likeness of Acorn Soft's unofficial Pac-Man to the original arcade game, they got threatened with a lawsuit by Atari, who owned the home rights at the time, causing them to change the name and rename it to Snapper. That similarity is still pretty clear to see, however. Outside of games for systems I personally owned, there are very few games that stick in my mind as much as Citadel. The reason for this is because I played it in my school computer lab when I should have been working. Trying to complete this amazing arcade adventure was certainly a lot more fun. Let's face it, there was only ever going to be one winner in this particular poll, and that is the groundbreaking space exploration game Elite. Ian Bell and David Braben's masterpiece originated on the BBC and received an incredible port to the Acorn Electron just after that has no right to be as good as it actually is.
This is the new Acorn Electron. It's powerful, it's versatile, and it's only £199. But there's one feature that will make it particularly welcome in homes all over Britain. It speaks the same language as most school children, BBC Basic. The Electron. Now your children can teach you all they know. The Acorn Electron can be found at local Acorn dealers and major high street stores. Just call 200 0200 for your nearest stockist.
And that rounds up my look at the 20 greatest Acorn Electron games of all time. But which games were you most surprised to see not make the final list? Or are there any games you don't think were worthy of inclusion in this countdown? I always love to hear the thoughts and views of my audience, so please get typing in that comments section. Before I go though, I must thank all of my loyal patrons and YouTube members for continuing to support my channel and make videos like this possible. However, I must give special thanks to the following people in particular for their much appreciated pledges: Dee Vaughan, Albert Davis, Richard Baker, Martin Wiggins, Peter Grantham, Bernard Santu, Mins, Classic Gamer 74, Josh Hartman, Daniel Skronsky, Ben P. Stein, Tabby Kitsune, Grady Haynes, Paul Daniel, Seth A. Robinson, Kalimatorn, Carl Olsen, Mark Strickland, Big Chuzzle, Cole Cloping, Black Siren, John Alberino, Crispy Cream, Justin Cooney, Luke Boynton, Sarah B, Richard Tate, Tailboy 2011 and Electron Star Collapse. If you also want to help support this channel, then you can now join as a member as little as £2 a month, where you'll get access to exclusive videos and updates and much more besides. Just click the button on my community page to get started. My Patreon is also still available if you prefer to support me in other ways too. I've been the Laird, I thank you for watching and I'll see you all again for another video very soon.